The museum curator called on a Wednesday afternoon and asked why my husband's war medals were hanging in the lobby of a private company. I thought she had the wrong family. My husband, Walter, had been dead for 3 years, but his medals were not missing. At least I did not believe they were. They belonged in a walnut box on the second shelf of my bedroom closet, beneath 2 wool blankets and a stack of letters tied with green ribbon. I had seen the box in August. It was November. "Mrs. Ellis," the caller said, "are you still there?" I looked down at the grocery list in my hand. Milk, tea, rice. Nothing on that paper belonged in the same world as the question she had asked. "Who are you?" "Dr. Celeste Morgan. I curate military history at the Alamo Regional Museum." I knew the name. Celeste had interviewed Walter 10 years earlier for an oral history project. She had spent 2 afternoons at our dining table listening to him describe the bridges he repaired in Bosnia as an army engineer. Walter did not enjoy talking about war. He liked talking about engineering. He could explain the weight of a temporary span, the patience required to inspect damaged concrete, and the exact sound a steel cable made before failure. If asked about metals, he changed the subject. Celeste understood that. It was one reason he trusted her. "I attended a reception last night at Vantage Systems," she continued. "They have installed a display honoring veterans connected to the company. Walter's medals are in the center case." Vantage Systems was where my son Michael worked. He was a regional sales director and had been pursuing a vice president position for nearly a year. "Are you certain they are Walter's?" "His name is on the Bronze Star certificate. I recognized the repair notation on the back of the NATO medal. You showed it to me during the interview." I sat at the kitchen table. "What does the display say?" Celeste was quiet for a moment. "It says the collection was donated by Michael Ellis in honor of his father and in support of Vantage's commitment to veterans." Donated. The word felt worse than stolen because it dressed the taking in generosity. I thanked Celeste and asked her not to contact Michael yet. She agreed. Then I went upstairs. The closet shelf looked undisturbed. 2 gray blankets sat exactly where I remembered them. The stack of letters was still tied with green ribbon. The walnut box was there. I pulled it forward and knew from the weight that it was empty. Inside, Michael had placed a folded sheet of cream paper. "Dad's legacy deserves to be seen," it said. There was no signature. He did not need one. Michael had a key to my house. I gave it to him after Walter died because grief made ordinary problems feel dangerous. A broken pipe at midnight, a fall in the shower, a day when I might not answer the telephone. For the first year, Michael used the key responsibly. He changed an air filter when I was sick. He checked the windows before a storm. He brought soup and left without rearranging my life. Then the helpfulness became investigative. He began asking why I kept important papers upstairs. He offered to move Walter's things into climate-controlled storage. He suggested I create a display for the medals in the living room. I declined each idea. The medals were not decorations to me. They were complicated objects from a complicated period in Walter's life. The Bronze Star represented courage. It also represented a night he rarely discussed and dreamed about for 20 years. The Army Commendation Medal sat beside a letter from a soldier whose life Walter helped save. The NATO medal had a dark scratch across its back from the day a storage cabinet collapsed during transport. That scratch was what Celeste recognized. Walter kept the medals private, not because he was ashamed of his service, but because he refused to let a ribbon simplify what happened. Michael knew that. He was 16 when Walter first explained it. "People like a clean hero story," Walter said. "Real service leaves mud on it." Michael had nodded. Now he had turned his father into a clean hero story in a corporate lobby. I called my daughter Anna first. She lived in Houston and spoke to Michael more often than I did. "Did you know about the Vantage display?" I asked. There was a pause. "He told me the company wanted to honor Dad. Did he tell you he took the medals from my closet?" "He said you agreed." "Did that sound like me?" Anna sighed. "Mom, honestly, I thought maybe you were ready. You keep everything shut away. Keeping something private is not the same as being unready." "I know," but she had not known until I said it. Michael had counted on that gap. He understood that people would find his version plausible because grief is treated as a room relatives may enter whenever they believe they have waited long enough. I asked Anna exactly what Michael told her. She forwarded 3 messages. The first said Vantage was launching a veterans initiative. The second said their father's story could inspire hundreds of employees. The third said I had finally agreed that Dad's legacy shouldn't remain boxed up. That final phrase appeared again later. It had been prepared for an audience. I telephoned Celeste and asked whether she could meet me at Vantage before the next public reception. There was one scheduled for Friday evening. Vantage planned to announce a new defense logistics contract and its veteran hiring pledge at the same event. Michael would present the display to the company's chief executive, Grant Holloway. Grant was also the person deciding the vice president promotion. The motive was beginning to show. On Thursday morning, Celeste met me in the parking garage beneath Vantage's headquarters. She wore a navy suit and carried white cotton gloves in a plastic sleeve. "I took photographs," she said, "from outside the case. I did not touch anything." She handed me a tablet. The display occupied an entire wall. At the top, silver letters read, "Courage builds the future." Walter's medals rested on blue velvet beneath a photograph of him in uniform. I had taken that photograph in our backyard before his second deployment. I knew because the left sleeve of his uniform was wrinkled. He had been holding our dog 1 minute earlier. Somebody had cropped me from the photograph. My shoulder was visible in the original. The corporate version left only Walter, a flag, and a bright future. Beside the medals stood a printed statement signed by Michael. "My father taught me that service means placing mission above self. It is my privilege to donate his decorations to Vantage Systems, where his values continue through our work." The company manufactured routing software. Walter had never heard of it. "Are the medals legally yours?" Celeste asked. "Walter left all personal property to me. His will is clear." "And Michael had no written permission?" "None." She enlarged one photograph. Small labels beneath the medals included acquisition numbers. That bothered Celeste. "Corporate displays use loan agreements," she said. "Acquisition numbers suggest permanent transfer." We entered through the lobby. The security guard recognized my last name from the display and smiled. "You must be Major Ellis's widow." Walter had retired as a captain. The label promoted him after death. "Captain Ellis," I corrected. The guard flushed. Celeste and I stood before the glass case. Seeing the medals in person changed my anger. Until then, the situation was an invasion of my home and a lie told by my son. In the lobby, it became a public performance built from Walter's silence. His letters had been arranged like props. One was open to a sentence about missing his children. The rest of the page was hidden. On the reverse side, which nobody could see, Walter had written about fear, exhaustion, and his uncertainty that the mission was helping anyone. Michael had chosen the safe sentence. Celeste studied the display card. "This oral history quotation is mine," she said. The panel quoted Walter describing the bridge as proof that disciplined teams can connect any divided landscape. Celeste shook her head. He said the bridge was temporary and imperfect, but still useful. They removed the second half. The company had simplified Walter twice. Once through Michael, once through marketing. A woman approached us wearing an employee badge. Her name was Lillian Price, Director of Corporate Communications. She asked whether she could help. Celeste introduced herself. I introduced myself. Lillian's professional smile disappeared. "Mrs. Ellis, we expected to meet you tomorrow." "Why?" "Michael said you might attend the reception." "Did Michael say I donated these items?" "He provided a signed family gift agreement." "Of course he did." We moved to a conference room. Lillian retrieved the agreement from the company's records. It contained 2 signature lines. Michael had signed as donor. My name appeared beneath the words, "Surviving spouse consent." The signature was a digital image. It looked like the one on my Christmas card list. I knew exactly how he obtained it. The previous December, Michael offered to print address labels from my spreadsheet. The file contained a scanned signature I used for holiday cards after arthritis made writing 80 names painful. He had copied a Christmas greeting onto a property transfer. Lillian went pale. "Did you sign this?" "No." "Could there be another version you signed by hand?" "No." She left the room and returned with company counsel, a man named Richard Hale. Richard did not waste time defending Michael. He asked for identification, a copy of Walter's will, and any inventory showing the medals belonged to me. I had brought all 3. Celeste had advised me well. The inventory was unusual. After Walter's oral history interview, the museum helped us photograph each medal, certificate, and letter for preservation. Every image had a date and description. The museum retained copies. There could be no honest confusion about where the collection came from. Richard closed the conference room door. "Mrs. Ellis, the company will secure the display immediately." "Secure it from whom?" He understood the question. "Access will be restricted. Nothing will leave the case except under documented supervision. I want the letters covered now." Lillian went to the lobby herself. Within 5 minutes, black fabric covered the entire display. Employees walking past stared. I did not enjoy that. I wanted Walter protected, not a new spectacle. Richard asked whether I wished to remove the collection immediately. Celeste recommended a joint inventory first. If anything was missing, we needed to know before the display was dismantled. The company scheduled the inventory for that afternoon. Michael arrived before it began. He entered the conference room quickly, closed the door, and looked from me to Celeste to Richard. "Mom, why didn't you call me?" The question was so familiar that I almost laughed. Why didn't you call me before entering my closet?" He looked at Richard. "This is a family misunderstanding." Richard placed the gift agreement on the table. "Did your mother sign this?" Michael sat down. "She gave verbal permission." "That is not what I asked. I handled the paperwork because she finds these things overwhelming. I had taught history for 34 years. I managed classrooms, field trips, budgets, parent conferences, and the occasional school board member who believed the Civil War could be covered in one cheerful week. Paperwork did not overwhelm me." "Michael," I said, "where did you get the signature?" He rubbed his forehead. "The Christmas file." Richard wrote something down. "Did anyone at Vantage know it was copied from another document?" "No." "Did Grant Holloway know the surviving spouse had not approved the gift?" "No." Michael's answers became short once his employer's name appeared. I asked why he did it. "Dad's story matters." "That is not why. It is part of why. What is the other part?" He looked at the covered display through the glass wall. "The Veterans Initiative was my proposal. Grant said it showed leadership beyond sales." There it was. He had not sold the medals for money. He had spent them as reputation. "Did Grant promise you the promotion?" "No." "Did you believe this would help?" He did not answer. Celeste asked whether he had listened to Walter's full oral history. Michael said he had heard excerpts. "Your father rejected heroic branding in that interview," she said. "He asked us not to exhibit his medals without family consultation. I am family. So is your mother." Michael turned to me. "You were never going to do anything with them. I was keeping them. In a box. A box is a place. It is not neglect. Nobody could learn from them. You did not donate them to a school or museum. You gave them to your boss." He flinched. That sentence reached him. Richard ended the meeting and escorted Michael to Human Resources. Celeste and I began the inventory with 2 company representatives and a security officer. We opened the case at 4:10. I wore Celeste's cotton gloves. The medals were all present. The certificates were present. 7 letters had been displayed. The walnut box had originally contained 9. 2 were missing. Michael claimed he brought everything to Vantage. Lillian searched the communications office. 1 missing letter was found inside a scanner. The other had been sent to a design contractor for high-resolution photography. That contractor was in Chicago. I felt my composure crack for the first time. Walter had written the missing letter to me after our son was born. It contained no military history. It was intimate, clumsy, and ours. Michael had given it to strangers because 1 paragraph mentioned leadership. Vantage paid for a bonded courier to return it the next morning. Until it arrived, I did not remove the collection. I sat in the conference room until after dark. Celeste stayed. She did not fill the time with reassurance. She told me about a museum that once mislabeled a nurse's uniform as belonging to a doctor because donors assumed the more prestigious title would attract attention. "Institutions like Clean Stories too," she said. "That is why ownership and context matter." At 9, Anna drove from Houston. She entered carrying a thermos and an apology. "I should have called you," she said. "Yes." I believed him because it sounded generous. That was the design. She sat beside me. We drank weak tea and watched cleaning crews move through the dark office. Anna told me Michael had been anxious about the promotion for months. His department's sales were strong, but Grant considered him too focused on personal performance. The Veterans Initiative gave him a story about values. He kept saying Dad would want to help him, Anna said. Walter would have helped Michael prepare for an interview. He would have reviewed a proposal, repaired a broken cabinet, or driven across the state at 2 a.m. He would not have offered his private letters as office decor. The missing letter arrived at 8:30 Friday morning. The courier handed it directly to me. I checked every page. A pencil mark had been added beside the leadership paragraph. The paper carried a faint scanner line. Otherwise, it was unharmed. I placed it in the walnut box. Then I signed the inventory receipt and took Walter home. The reception was canceled. Vantage announced an issue regarding permissions for certain historical materials. Michael was placed on leave. He did not receive the promotion. Grant Holloway called me personally. He apologized for the company's failure to verify the donation. He also asked whether I would consider allowing the medals to appear in a future display under a proper loan. I told him no. Not because no display could ever be appropriate, because Vantage had already shown me what it wanted from Walter. It wanted courage without doubt, service without politics, sacrifice without family, and a quotation short enough to fit beneath a logo. Walter deserved a fuller room. Celeste offered one. The museum had been planning a small exhibition about military engineering and civilian rebuilding. Instead of centering medals, it would include maps, tools, oral histories, and accounts from local families affected by deployments. She asked whether I wanted to participate. This time, somebody asked. I did not answer immediately. I listened to Walter's full interview again. His voice filled my living room on a Sunday morning. He spoke slowly. He described the temporary bridge. He described villagers waiting on both sides. He admitted that he did not know what happened to the bridge after his unit left. At the end, Celeste asked what he wanted people to remember. That repair is not the same as victory, he said. Sometimes you only make crossing possible. What happens after that belongs to other people. I had forgotten that sentence. It gave me my answer. I agreed to loan the engineering maps, one tool, the oral history, and replicas of the medals. The originals would remain with me. The private letters would not be displayed. One carefully selected passage could be read in the audio program, but only in context. The museum accepted every condition. Michael did not. When his leave ended, Vantage offered him a lower-level position in another region. He resigned instead. For 6 weeks, he blamed the company. Then he blamed Celeste. Then Anna. He did not blame me directly because he wanted access to my house. I had changed the locks the day I brought the medals home. When he discovered that, he stood on my porch holding the old key. You really think I would steal from you again? I think the key reminds both of us that I once believed you would not. He stared at the brass teeth in his palm. I was trying to honor Dad. You were trying to use him. Those can both be true, not without permission. I did not let him inside. We spoke through the screen door for 20 minutes. It was one of the saddest conversations of my life. He told me he felt invisible after Walter died. People asked how I was coping and treated him as though a grown son needed no mourning. At work, The Veterans Project made colleagues look at him with respect. He said seeing Walter's medals under glass made his father's life feel important again. I believed that part. Grief can explain why somebody reached for a thing. It cannot explain away the copied signature, the cropped photograph, or the promotion he hoped to gain. You could have asked to see the medals, I said. You might have said no. Yes. He looked at me then. The entire conflict lived inside that word. He had not avoided asking because he forgot. He avoided asking because my answer still had power. Michael began seeing a counselor who worked with veterans' families. I know because he told me, not because I requested proof. He also contacted Vantage and admitted in writing that no family authorization existed. The company already knew, but the letter mattered. It was the first correction he made without attaching a request for forgiveness. The museum exhibition opened the following May. It was called What We Carried Across. Walter's section included a bridge diagram, his field ruler, an audio station, and a photograph of our entire family in the backyard. My shoulder was not cropped out. Neither were Anna or Michael. Michael attended alone. He stood at the edge of the room for nearly an hour before approaching me. The replicas look real, he said. That is the point of a good replica. Where are the originals? Safe. He nodded. Celeste introduced a group of high school students to Walter's recording. One student asked why the museum displayed a scratched medal instead of repairing the replica. Michael answered before Celeste could, because the scratch is part of what happened. He looked at me after saying it. I did not smile. I did not need to. For the first time, he had repeated his father accurately. Our relationship remains careful. Michael does not have a key. He calls before visiting. When he wants to borrow a photograph, he asks which version may be copied and where it will appear. Those questions sound formal between a mother and son. They also sound safe. Anna and I cataloged the rest of Walter's belongings. We did not do it because we planned to display everything. We did it so privacy would no longer look like uncertainty to anybody searching for an excuse. Each object has a description. Some say, museum loan permitted. Some say, family access with consent. The letters tied with green ribbons say, private. No explanation follows. Private is a complete category. The walnut box returned to the second closet shelf. It is not hidden. It is placed. There is a difference. On Walter's birthday, I take it down and polish the brass star with a soft cloth. My thumb leaves a print before I wipe it away. For years, I thought legacy meant what remained after a person died. Now I think it also means who receives the right to tell the story, what parts may stay silent, and whether love is willing to ask before opening the box. Walter spent his career building crossings. Michael tried to use one of them as a ladder. We are still repairing the difference. Repair is not victory. But sometimes it makes crossing possible. The museum exhibition remained open for 6 months. I visited 4 times. On my second visit, an older woman stood listening to Walter's interview with her eyes closed. When the recording ended, she told me her brother had served in the same region. He never discussed it after returning home. She had spent 30 years believing silence meant indifference. Walter's description of exhaustion gave her another possibility. That conversation did more to honor him than the silver letters in Vantage's lobby ever could. It asked nothing from his reputation. It simply allowed one complicated memory to meet another. Later, Celeste showed me the visitor response cards. People wrote about temporary structures in their own lives. A foster parent wrote about helping a teenager reach adulthood without expecting to remain the center of his story. A civil engineer described inspecting a bridge his grandfather had helped build. A veteran wrote only 5 words. "Thank you for leaving doubt in." I copied that sentence into my journal. Michael eventually returned to sales work at a smaller company. He did not tell his new employer about Walter's medals during the interview. I know because he mentioned, with a hint of surprise, that he had earned the position by discussing his own work. "How did that feel?" I asked. "Less impressive," he said. Then he smiled. "Better, though." That answer did not erase the forgery. It showed me that he was beginning to understand the hunger behind it. For Christmas, he gave me an archival storage sleeve for Walter's bridge diagrams. The package included a receipt and no offer to organize the closet. I laughed when I opened it. Michael looked nervous until I explained why. "It is the first gift you have given me in years that does not contain a plan," I said. He considered that. "I can return it if the size is wrong." The size is right. We spent the afternoon with Anna and the grandchildren. Nobody asked to see the medals. The walnut box remained upstairs. Its absence from the table did not make Walter absent from the family. We told stories about his terrible pancakes, his habit of straightening crooked picture frames in restaurants, and the time he drove 40 miles before realizing our suitcases were still in the garage. None of those stories came with ribbons. All of them belonged to him. That evening, after everyone left, I found one of Michael's fingerprints on the glass of a framed family photograph. For a moment, I felt the old alarm. Then I remembered that he had picked up the frame to show his daughter the dog cropped from Vantage's version. I wiped the glass clean. Not every fingerprint is theft. Learning to tell the difference has been part of my own repair. I remain careful. Care is not the same as fear. The box stays where I placed it. The inventory remains current, and the letters stay tied with green ribbon. Sometimes a legacy should educate a room. Sometimes it should comfort one person. Sometimes it should rest in darkness until its owner chooses otherwise. Walter understood that a bridge is useful because it connects 2 separate sides, not because it erases the distance between them. Michael and I are standing on separate sides of what he did. We no longer pretend the gap is gone. We are building carefully enough that neither of us has to steal a crossing.